So a lot of people learn and start learning instruments to get into a band, but it can actually be really difficult, especially in these early stages, to tell yourself, am I actually good enough to be in a band? So in this video, I'm going to walk you through some things which you're going to need to be able to do if you want to play in a band, and then ultimately if you're good enough to play in a band yet. So the first thing you're obviously going to need if you're playing in a band is you need to know some tunes. Whatever tunes you're going to be playing with said band, you're going to want to know those tunes before you get into it. If you've got, there's a band member that you know and you're looking to join the band, ask them what tunes they play and learn those tunes beforehand. And if they say there's anything different about the way they do it, ask that as well, because if you haven't learned tunes and you haven't learned bass lines like that one, for example, if that was a bass line on a tune that you were doing, then you don't know what you're going to get, and ultimately you won't be as prepared, and it can actually be a lot more stressful for your first experience. And ultimately you don't want that. You want to be going in, well, ideally you want to be going and getting everything perfectly done. But this ties in also to my next point, which is you're going to make mistakes. And I think admitting that you're going to make mistakes is a very big thing about being in a band and working well in a band, because people will make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes and just keep going through those mistakes. If the mistakes are too bad, then if it's a rehearsal, it's fine, you can just stop and look back on that section again. People aren't going to think less of you if you make mistakes, especially in the beginning. They know you're a new player. They're not going to downplay you for that unless you're playing with some not great musicians. Good musicians would never do that, essentially. They would still give you the care and respect that you deserve as a human being and support you through, so then that you can get those mistakes done. If you show that you're making progress and you are working hard to alleviate those mistakes, then the musicians will be happy with you. If you're not really working at it and you don't have that good mindset towards it, then perhaps the opinions may be a little bit different there. So really do pay attention to that and make sure that you're still making progress. It doesn't matter if it's small progress or fast progress, but just, perhaps even tell them what you're doing to progress further, what you're doing to get better. Like, oh yeah, today I've worked on, the bass line for the chicken. If you're playing the chicken, for example, and I've got that bass line down now, so I can navigate around that really easily, and now I can play the chicken as I want. But never say that you fully know the tune until you know the tune. Essentially, always say the truth and make sure you're working towards your goals. Feel like you can make mistakes, it's all right. Ultimately, if you actually think about something too hard in music, you end up making more mistakes. So try and not think about it too much. I know it's like it's like telling someone to walk and saying, oh yeah, all you need to do is not fall over. Like, oh yeah, I know that bit, but it still does come into effect. So yeah, make sure you're doing that as well. So that's the sort of first bit of what you're going to want and what skills you're going to need, perhaps socially in a band context. But what physical, actual skills are you going to need to be able to play in a band? Well, the first thing you're going to need, and probably the most important thing, is good tone. Whether your technique is the standard one or not, it doesn't matter as long as you're getting good tone and you're not putting tons and tons of effort into your playing. Like, if you're tired after just one tune, then you might want to reevaluate. But if you get good tone across the bass and you can sort of just, like, I find this is a really good exercise where I'm doing at the moment, just sort of walking at crotchet tempo and just, especially on fretless, I'm practicing my intonation, but you're also practicing your tone. If you can get clean tone, and then if you go higher up, and if you can get clean tone higher up, and you can get clean tone on every string, and it's consistent tone. Doesn't have to be perfectly consistent all the time. What makes music sound human is those inconsistencies in note velocity, but if you're getting good tone, then you've got nothing to worry about to start with, because ultimately, even if you can play whatever you want to play, let's say you're going to play the Come On Come Over bass riff, which is this. If you can play that bass line, but you don't have good tone, then it still sounds awful, and that is something which you really need to get out first. And it is sort of one of the first things you should do as a bass player learning as well. get that good tone dialed in, as that's probably the best thing you can do starting on it. It's all really about this hand position, and then also the pressure that you're applying with this hand and where you're putting it based on the fret. Remember, just behind the fret is where you want it, and you probably won't be playing a fretless, but on a fretless it's just where the note is, otherwise it's out of tune, of course. Then another thing which you're going to want technique wise is you want a good time, and you want to be able to lock in with a drummer, or just if there isn't a drummer in the band, because sometimes there isn't, especially some jazz contexts, it could just be bass, piano and a horn perhaps, or it could be like piano, bass, drums as well. You don't know what scenario you'll be in, but if you can lock in with a drummer, it's always good to practice with drum backing tracks and whatnot if you can lock in to that. But also having the ability to play in time on your own is a really good way to practice. So start with drummers and backing tracks and things, or even just a metronome, and keeping in time and playing things in time. And then, try it maybe without some drums, and then, maybe just some chords and things like that. And then eventually try it. And if you can keep good time on your own without any other instrument there, then you certainly do have good time. And that's the time that you want when you're in a band context. I know there's not really going to be a position, perhaps maybe very often, where you're just playing by yourself, but it's still good to really have good time nailed when it's just you playing, because it means that you can really lock in when you've got all those other band members going. It sounds easy as a concept, oh yeah, I just play my own and play in time, but it is much harder than you might think. And there's all sorts of games that you can play with yourself when you're doing this sort of thing, like only having the metronome hit on beat 2 every other bar, and you can really see how difficult it gets to keep in time, especially when you get some more complicated rhythms in there perhaps. So it's really good to practice and rehearse all of that. And this is a big thing, just know your fretboard, and also from that know some music notation. It doesn't matter if it's tab or bass clef, but check which one the band is using before you go, and you play with them, because if you can't read the music notation, you don't have to read it perfectly or really well, but if you just can't even interpret it at all, then that's not great. And while the tab, is pretty easy to pick up and especially useful for beginners, and it can tell you a lot of things about where you need to put your fingers for the finger positionings, ultimately reading bass clef and deciding where you put your fingers yourself, and then your preferences from that and how you'd play this, is a skill which I think you should learn to be in a band as well. And you can learn bass clef, you can literally learn it in a day, like just learn sort of the basic sort of low E, and you could go up to high E, I think is all you're really going to need. So 2 octaves worth of range, learn that on bass clef, and you're not going to be perfectly fluent in a day, but you can learn where those notes are in a day, and then you can be like, oh yeah. And then once you learn the notes on your fretboard, and there's F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, etc., you can apply that to the bass clef on there, and then you can start reading some simple bass clef and playing around with some lines in bass clef as well as just tab, because I think it's useful to know both, but do check beforehand, because if the music's all in tab anyway, then you might as well just read it in tab. But if it is in bass clef, like a lot of things are, if you're a bass player and you're playing in a band, a lot of things are in bass clef, then you want to do that. And if chord charts are there as well, then you've got to learn your chord tone notes as well, which is the 1, 3, 5, 7 of each chord. You can watch a video, I've already got one on how to practice chord tones if you're interested in doing that. So to sort of conclude this video, we've got all my social tips, apart from there's one which I add, which is always just be nice and kind and courteous to all the band members. You probably have arguments at points over things, but try and keep it concise and perhaps not too argumentative in a way. Just make other people not hate you as a person when you're there. It sounds pretty easy, but sometimes things can go all over the place, and that's really not what you want to happen. So always be nice, be polite, and be kind. But once you have those other social skills sort of around the bass, and then you have those physical skills around the bass, then that's when I think you're ready to join a band. But I really want to end this tune with a slightly different message. Like, yeah, that's more in the professional sense of joining a band. But if it's a band with a few mates, then just ask them, hey, what tunes do you play? And just learn a tune, and then just go and play that tune with them. Doesn't matter if it's one tune. Doesn't matter if it's not even a whole tune, if it's half a tune, go and play, because playing with people and experiencing music with other people is probably the best thing you can do to boost your progress. They are literally boosting your playing by you playing with them. So I should always try and strive and play with people who are better than you. Even when you get better at the bass, try and still find people out there who are better than you, because there will certainly be those people, and see if you can go out and play with those people. And that is ultimately the best thing about being in bands and being part of these groups, is you can play with people who are better than you and then boost your own progress. And also, it's just such a magical thing to play with other musicians. So that's all I've got for today. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.